Morning everyone, I'm going to talk to you about the current account, and if you have a deficit on the current account, what will be the consequences for the economy. Remember, the current account is looking at all of the money coming into a country and all of the money going out of a country due to exports, imports, income flows and transfers. You might want to remember that as. So exports, imports, income flows and transfers. And in really simple terms, you could say if you miss out these two, these are often not referred to, you have a current account deficit where the value of your exports is less than the value of your imports. And remember, this is looking at goods and services. What are the consequences then for the economy? There can be some bad things about having a current account deficit. The first one of these is that this means we've got a decrease in demand for domestic products, ones that have been produced within that country, because it means that you are exporting less of those products, and it also appears that perhaps your consumers are choosing to buy things that have been imported instead. This has knock-on consequences. You'll probably have a decrease in unemployment because you won't require as many people to make things, either goods or services, within your country. Also, you'll have a decrease in tax revenue. This is because less people have a job and therefore income tax receipts will go down. But also, if less people have a job, they won't be shopping as much and VAT receipts will go down, and therefore corporation tax receipts will go down because firms won't make as much profit. And the last thing here is that payments of unemployment benefits for people, job seekers allowance, will go up if we've got more people who are unemployed, and that will have knock-on effects because there'll be less spending possible in other areas by the government. The next possible negative is to ask yourself, is this due to decreased productivity? Remember, productivity is output per factor input per time period. For example, labour productivity means that the output per worker per time period. And if that's decreasing, we know that this will be increasing our costs per unit. And this will be increasing our price. And that may be the reason that we are exporting less than we're importing, because we have low productivity and therefore our goods are more expensive than they would be otherwise. If you have low productivity, and this is the cause for the current account deficit, that might be a cause for concern for the government. They have to decide what they're going to do about this loss of productivity, and it's an issue if it's continuing over time. The final significant negative would be that the country isn't getting enough money in to be able to pay for all of these imports. And that would be an issue in the longer term because they're having to borrow money to pay for all of these imports. So not getting sufficient money in to pay for imports. And this would ultimately lead to an increase in debt. Looking at positives, though, potentially, of a current account deficit, there can be good things about it. Maybe the reason that the value of your exports is less than the value of imports is because you're importing capital. If you're importing capital and spending a lot of money on that, that machinery will allow you to increase output in future. And if you increase output in future, you might also be more productive if you have more machinery, and that will all enable you in the future to be able to export more. So perhaps this is just a short-term problem. The second one is that if you export less, that means you have a decrease in overall demand in your economy. And this might mean that you have less demand pull inflation, which would be better, potentially, on its own anyway, for the economy. Thirdly, if you have less exports, this will cause your currency, if it's a floating currency, like the pound, to weaken. If the currency is weaker, that will then cause your exports to become less expensive, and ultimately your exports will go up. So actually the problem solved itself. The last one, how much of a bad thing is this, having the current account deficit? What percentage of GDP is the deficit? Maybe it's only a small percentage of GDP and ultimately it isn't too much of a problem. With all of these things, positives and negatives, you need to decide, is this something that's going on for a long time? Because that will help you decide whether it's a significant concern. Evaluation points to consider.